Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Another week of distance learning. All right, so we are on Chasing Vermeer, chapters 7, 8, and 9. Let's go ahead and jump right into our story. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully it doesn't freeze up on us, right? Fingers crossed. All right. Chapter 7. The Man on the Wall. This is page 61 if you're looking. Page 61. I move something real quick. Okay. When Miss Hussey read the piece of writing aloud at the end of the week, there was a shuffling and a looking around for who seemed embarrassed or who looked too pleased. A strange chair? Modern art with things hanging from it? Does the writer want to stay anonymous, or do you want to tell us what this is? Miss Hussey asked after several guesses had been made. Silence. Petra cleared her throat. Well, it's a special book, Petra thought suddenly of the calm, intelligent woman in her dream, the woman in the yellow jacket. She probably never had to explain her writing. And suddenly, Petra felt the woman was sort of keeping her company, whispering, "It doesn't matter what they say. I understand." A book? Snorted Denise. Berries and smelly pants? Petra's mouth closed in a tight line. Miss Hussey turned towards Denise. Yes, unexpected smiles can carry the power of surprise. They're refreshing, aren't they? Denise looked as if she had smelled something bad. Calder was impressed by Petra's writing and wished it were his own. An hour later in the cafeteria, he spotted Petra in a corner by herself. He decided to join her. He wanted to tell her about the threesome outside his house yesterday and how much he liked her description. He was imagining how surprised Petra would be to have his company. It was then that Calder's lunchbox collided with the back of a chair and popped open. Petra heard a bang and watched his bologna sandwich, now airborne, cross the table with impressive speed. By the time Calder retrieved his sandwich and sat down, she had begun to laugh. All right, Calder said. It's just that I was reading about inexplicable loud noises and things falling from the sky. And then there was this whop, and then a flying. She was gasping. It's not you, just so perfect. What are you reading? The book I wrote about. I found it at Powell's yesterday. Calder saw that it said Low on the spine. Weird title. No wonder she was trying to cover it up. It's by this guy, Charles Fort, who spent a lot of his life looking for newspaper articles about unexplained stuff, Petra said. You know, like weird lights in the sky, objects traveling through rooms without any visible explanation, ghosts, crazy things like that. He talks about how blind and idiotic he thinks a lot of our education is. And he's funny. He doesn't take anyone's thinking too seriously, including his own. She paused, surprised at herself for saying so much. I love hearing about people who figure things out for themselves. Plus, I love to think about things that no one understands. Yet, Calder's mouth was full. Almost anywhere you look in here, there's something amazing. Listen to this. Petra flipped to the middle of the book. There have been many mysterious disappearances of human beings. Chicago Tribune, that's a newspaper, a real newspaper. Chicago Tribune. Oh, I'm sorry, it's stopping, but these are actual articles found in these newspapers on these dates. So keep that in mind. Chicago Tribune, January 5th, 1900. Sherman Church, a young man employed in the Augusta Mills, Battle Creek, Michigan, has disappeared. He was seated in the company's office when he arose and ran into the mill. He has not been seen since. The mill has almost been taken to pieces by the searchers, and the river, woods, and country have been scoured. And then, records of 6 persons who, between January 14th, 1920 and December 9th, 1923, were found lingering in or near the small town of Broomford, Essex, England, unable to tell how they got there or anything else about themselves. Calder stopped chewing and was staring at her. Tommy knows a kid called Frog, a kid in New York who just disappeared. Frog? Petra started to laugh again. a flying frog. Calder kind of wanted to laugh too, but the news wasn't supposed to be funny. What was she talking about anyway? Do you believe this guy, Fort? As soon as Calder said it, he wished he hadn't. It wasn't really what he meant. Petra's face closed. She looked disappointed. Well, part of what is so neat is that he worked from newspapers. I know most people would think this was completely stupid. Abruptly, Petra started to gather her things, stuffing low into her lunch bag. This wasn't going well. Calder did understand Petra's excitement. It was just that he hadn't wanted to look like an idiot again. Plus, the frog connection had made such a weird coincidence. Before Petra could get up, he blurted, "Your writing was great. And also, I saw Miss Hussey, an old lady called Mrs. Sharp, and Mr. Watch, my boss from Powell's, outside my house yesterday. They were all together." Petra no longer looked unfriendly. Mrs. who? Sharp. At least that's what it sounded like. Petra pulled out her book again. She opened to the first page and turned it to Calder. Strange, huh? Louise Coffin Sharp, or Sharpe. Calder read. Do you think that's her? I could find out, he said, as if there was nothing to it. Okay, Petra beamed at him. Thanks. I'd love to know. I didn't think the first owner would still be alive. The next day was Saturday, and Calder arrived at Powell's early. Mr. Watts was seated behind the front counter, frowning over what looked like a letter. Ah, yes, I need you to make a delivery. Mr. Watts folded the letter. A letter. I'm sending you down the street with some books. The name is Sharp. Calder grinned. Events were fitting together now with the precision of pentominoes. He ventured, would that be Louise Sharp? Mr. Watts looked stern. Yes, but not to you. He handed Calder a paper bag filled with books. On the way over, Calder peeked into the bag. There were some novels in French and a new book about art by David Hockney. It looked like the kind of thing that Hussey would read. There was also a small, beat-up book called An Experiment in Time. When Calder flipped to the table of contents, he saw that chapter 2 was called The Puzzle. Mrs. Sharp must not be all bad. If she recognized Calder, she didn't let on. He decided not to remind her about the glass of water. Calder noticed that she had unusually green eyes, a sea green surrounded by lots of wrinkles and bones. She asked him to wait in the living room while she got a check. He looked around. He was standing on a huge oriental carpet. Velvet cushions, naked sculpture, glass cabinets. The place was a museum. And in the corner on a neatly organized desk sat a large, fancy computer. Then he saw it. Calder couldn't believe his eyes. There, hanging over the sofa, was a big version of the painting on his box. Do you know what that is? Her voice made him jump. I was going to ask you. You see, my grandma gave me a box with that that painting on the cover. And I was going to try to find out who did it. And I just did some homework that describes it. So strange, isn't it? Mrs. Sharp sniffed and handed Calder the check. Well, not really. That's a print of the Vermeer painting called The Geographer. There must be thousands of them around. The Vermeer painting. Oh, we have a picture here. Okay, so it looks we have Calder and Miss Sharp's or Sharpay's, living room, and he's by the couch. And this must be part of the painting of the geographer, right? Because that describes what Calder had on his box. And I do see a frog. Okay, I need to get my card out. Boom, my card. Are you guys writing yours down somewhere? Page 60, page 68. Okay, I'm gonna put one frog, but there has to be a pentomino somewhere, at least one, right? So, well, I don't want to keep you, but we need to find that pentomino. So I'm gonna put a big star here so I know I need to go back. Go back. I mean, I would think so, because every time we find a frog, we find a pentomino, right? We found a frog, found a pentomino, found a frog, found a pentomino. So, oh my gosh, I just found it. Did you see it? It's right here. All right, let's look in. I don't know what letter that is off the top of my head, so I have to look at our thing here. It goes, looks like a Z kind of, right? Is it this one? The Z? All right, I'm going to put Z. Let me know if you find something else, though. Keep me in the loop. Okay, so there must be thousands of them around. Oh, who was Vermeer? I know I've heard his name, but you know, Calder, still surprised, was warming up to the situation. He was Dutch and painted in the 17th century. She paused, looking thoughtfully at Calder's enthusiastic grin. I'm sure you could find a book in your school library that told you something about him. Wow, this is just so perfect. Calder, in his excitement, was already headed for the front door. Then he remembered Petra's book. Hey, Mrs. Sharp, can I ask you a question? It's about Lowe, a book of mine. A book a friend of mine, Petra Andely, found at Powell's. And, well, I think maybe it has your name in it. Mrs. Sharp was dreadfully silent for a moment. What was she thinking? When she spoke, her voice was soft. Do you understand the book? Calder looked up. He couldn't tell from her face whether this was a trick question. Part of it, anyway, he lied. I mean, we both really like the stuff about weird things happening that nobody understands, like people who disappear. And it's cool that he found all that in newspapers. I didn't think anybody read books like that anymore. Mrs. Sharp looked almost human now. Encouraged, Calder blurted out, oh, yes, all the time. Oh, no, he'd gone too far. Come for tea one day after school. Bring your friend, and we'll talk about Charles Fort. Mrs. Sharp's voice was now icy. 4 o'clock. She turned to open the door, and Calder knew he was being dismissed. Okay, I will. But the door shut in his face. Couldn't even say thank you. Calder walked back towards Powell's in a daze. My friend Petra? He hoped she would become his friend, and fast. There was no way he'd go back to talk about that Lowe stuff on his own. How did he get himself into this? Monday morning was blue and white, and everything was blowing. Cumulus clouds, bare branches, scrapes of rubbish. Calder stepped out on his front door and saw Petra chasing a piece of paper up the block toward the Castellones. As he watched, the paper shot skyward in a graceful loop and headed over the roof of the Castellones treehouse and toward the train tracks. Petra stopped. Darn, she said. That letter was half buried in your garden. I only got to read the beginning, but it said something about an old crime in art. He shrugged. Probably just some crazy advertisement anyway. Not a real letter at all. I've been thinking about Charles House. I've been thinking about the Charles House book, Calder began. Fort, Petra tried. Petra tried not to smile. And something else. Calder took a deep breath. Mrs. Sharp, that is her book, and she's interested that you know about it. She wants to meet you. Petra stopped walking. Seriously? She wants us to have tea with her one day. She just kind of announced it. Calder looked at the tops of the trees as if they'd been invited to. What would he do if Petra wouldn't go? Mrs. Sharp would soon realize he'd lied about reading Lowe. Petra was silent for a moment. Wait, how did you talk to her? Calder explained about his job at Powell's and the delivery yesterday. The rest of the walk to school, they talked about coincidence, agreeing that it didn't always seem to be accidental. And Petra shared some of Charles Fort's ideas about looking carefully at things. Calder wanted to tell her about his thoughts and about the coincidence of seeing the geographer on Mrs. Sharp's wall. Didn't. Miss Hussey hadn't read Calder's description aloud yet, and he was hoping Petra would like it. They agreed that there was a great deal to be figured out in the world. Petra confided she thought Miss Hussey might be willing to let them collect strange data in the way Fort did. That is, if kids like Denise didn't wreck it for everyone. Maybe data about art and unexplained stuff, Petra blurted. Petra, you're amazing. How could he ever have thought that wedge of hair was anything but brainy? Petra's mouth twisted strangely. You'd better read that book before you agree with me. You might not be as crazy as I am. He laughed and stirred the pentominoes in his pocket happily. This year was getting better all the time. Calder borrowed Petra's copy of Lowe that afternoon. She was right. Fort was an extraordinary thinker. He looked fearlessly at occurrences no one could explain. Even better, he looked everywhere for patterns. Calder understood the man's fascination with connecting things that didn't seem related, and he admired the way Fort challenged experts. How could Mrs. Sharp have ever gotten tired of such an exciting book? Speaking of Mrs. Sharp, he had some detective work to do. The reproduction of the geographer in his library book was clearer and brighter than the copy of the painting on his box. So we can look that up, the geographer. Behind the man was a framed map, and above that, the signature I. Veer Meer. And under that, MDCLXVIII. Roman numerals, right? Calder counted. So he's figuring out the number from the Roman numerals. 1,000 plus 500 plus 100 plus 50 plus 10 plus 5 plus 3, 1668. The artist's full name was Johannes Vermeer. That's Johannes, not Johannes, Johannes Vermeer, also known as Han Vermeer. Han Vermeer. He was from the Netherlands in Northern Europe. The book explained that no one knew for sure who the geographer was, but that the area where Vermeer lived was a center for map makers. It talked about how people with money liked to hang maps on the walls of their houses to show they were wealthy and that they thought about the world. Map making was a respectable profession, something between a science and an art. Calder flipped back and forth in the book, looking at some of the other Vermeer paintings. Most of them showed people in front of a window. The geographer's rug appeared in many of the paintings, and the same yellow jacket turned up in a number of places. The pictures made you feel as though you were peeking in at someone else's private moment. The light that came from outside made ordinary objects seem important. A quill, pen, a pitcher with milk, an earring, the brass buttons that were a part of a straight-back chair. It occurred to Calder that there could be hidden information here. After all, codes involved repetition, and the same objects appeared again and again in Vermeer's work. There's obvious geometry of window panes and floor tiles, and then all the pearls, baskets, pictures, and framed maps. There was symmetry, both complete and carefully broken. Calder read more. The book said that Vermeer died penniless when he was in his 40s, and that almost nothing was known about his life. No one understood why such a fabulous painter had made only 35 works of art. No one knew who the people he painted were, or why he painted the things he did. No one knew how he became an artist. Vermeer had left behind more questions than answers. Chapter 8. On the morning of Sunday, October 31st, Petra overheard her dad telling her mom that he just wasn't up for Halloween. Frank, think of the kids, her mom sounded tense. Then Petra heard her dad rumble on part of what he said. Sorry, honey, letter in the mail this week. You'll see. Be over before we know it. He'd given her mom a hug. What letter? And what happened to the one that was torn up? What would be over? Did their family need money? Would they have to move? Petra suddenly longed to tell Miss Hussey that she just realized important letters couldn't be talked about because they always held secrets. Miss Hussey must never have gotten one, or she'd know that. Harper Avenue was in its element on Halloween. People came from miles around to walk down the block where Petra and Calder lived. Families took pride in becoming as frightening as possible. Graves sprang up in front of yards, complete with scattered bones, headstones, and shovels. Tarantulas looped from gutters, and pumpkins flashed and growled. Corpses hanging from a second-story window swung gently in the darkness. Chocolate eyeballs rolled underfoot. A mesh of cobwebs covered bushes and porches, and crackly voices and organ music came from flower beds. For the kids who lived on the block, costumes were a big deal. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, Petra was struggling to tie ribbons in her hair. Bouncy and curly, it didn't like the idea of being pulled back so tightly. Petra finally yanked out all the ribbons and made a tight ponytail and a tidy bun. Then she fastened the already tied ribbons on with bobby pins. Next, She put on her homemade earrings. They were large white beads that hung on a hoop. She looked different, quite definitely. The train roared by outside the window, and Petra stood watching her earrings tremble with the vibrations. She put on her jacket with a fake fur collar and cuffs. She had sewn carefully trimmed pieces of an old Dalmatian costume onto a yellow sweater. She was ready, lowering her lids a fraction of an inch and smiling a smile that was more an idea than a movement. She looked at herself sideways in the mirror. She felt filled, at least for that moment, with the easy elegance of the writer in her dream. All right, so we have another illustration, right? But something, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've noticed that every other illustration we're finding something. There's one between here, there's one between here, there's one between here. So my guess is there's probably not a frog or a pentomino in this image. I know this video is getting kind of long, so I'm gonna have to go back and look. So I'm gonna write this down. Page 78. So I just wrote it down on my card that you probably can't see. There you go. I wrote mine down on my card. Okay. When Petra opened the door, there was Calder on her front porch wearing a large red letter made out of taped together cardboard squares. Hi, Calder. Petra. She suddenly wished she hadn't done all that stuff to her hair and instinctively pulled back out of the light. You look like something I've seen. I mean, just like a painting. I do? Petra mumbled. How did you think of dressing up like her? Like who? Petra looked at Calder directly now, frowning slightly. The lady with the feather pen. The lady at the desk. Calder tried to protect his pentomino costume as Petra pulled him into her front hall. Tell me exactly what you're talking about. Look out. Now you've bent my ass, Calder said crossly. What are you so upset about? He's dressed up like a pentomino. I'm sorry. It's just that you recognize my costume. You see, I dreamed about it. What do you mean you dreamed about that painting? I didn't say it was a painting. I don't know what it was. Weird. I have your picture at home. Come over and see it for yourself. They were down Petra's steps and up Calder's in seconds. Once inside, Calder ducked out of his F and flew up the stairs. When he reappeared, he was carrying an oversized library book. He sat on the floor and leaped quickly through the reproduction. Petra knelt beside him. There! Petra's stomach gave a sickening lurch. It was not only her costume, it was the woman in her dream. She touched the reproduction with her hand, as if to be sure it was really there. The caption next to it read, Johannes Vermeer, a lady writing, 1665. Chapter 9. Calder and Petra found 3 other paintings of the woman in the yellow jacket. In one, she was wearing a pearl necklace and looking into a mirror. In another, she was playing a lute, kind of like a flute. In the third, she was seated at a writing table and a maid was handing her what looked like a letter. You've never seen any of these before? Calder looked worried. Never. Petra had taken off one of her earrings and was rolling it around on the floor. So how did you dream about something you didn't know existed? I wonder, Petra said slowly, if paintings that float into your mind on their own are kind of like flying frogs or disappearing people. You mean your dream might be part of something bigger? Calder jumped up and got a piece of paper and pencil. He handed them to Petra. Maybe we should start keeping a record of unexplained stuff. Petra ducked her head happily over the paper. Fine. She began. Charles Fort, chief questioner, philosopher, guide. Hey, here's something else. Did you know I made that F costume because I was thinking F for Fort? We'll include that. Calder told Petra about his box, explaining the reason he happened to be looking at the book. I wonder what made me remember that old thing anyway. If it hadn't popped into my mind, I wouldn't have recognized the geographer, Mrs. Sharps, and then I would never have read about Vermeer or recognized your costume. It's Miss Hussey's fault, Petra said, delighted. It all started with her finding some art assignment. We found it all right. They spent the next 10 minutes trying to figure out what happened. What happened when? Petra wrote 1. Calder writes about box with geographer on it. Same day that Petra finds Lowe. Writes about it then dreams about woman. 2. Calder and Petra have lunch. Talk about Ford. 3. Calder visits Mrs. Sharp and sees geographer. Hears about Vermeer. Calder takes book out of library. 5. Petra and Calder make costumes. Petra thinks about Vermeer. Calder thinks about Charles Fort. 6. Halloween. Calder recognizes Petra's costume. Calder was flipping back and forth in the book. This doesn't tell you too much about Vermeer's life. Do you think we should do some research? I've been wondering if there's some kind of secret code that no one's ever noticed before. I mean, why so many pearls and pens and button thingies? Good thinking, Petra grinned. And maybe there's some other crazy connection with Charles Fort, Calder went on. Some facts we might be missing. We could look in the high school library tomorrow. Great. Calder stood up and reached into his pocket. He stirred the pentomino pieces around and pulled one out. V for Vermeer. He smiled in a distracted way. At Petra, who looked at the puzzle. A 1 in 12 chance. Think it's a coincidence? On the way to school the next morning, Petra asked Calder about the V for Vermeer business. I told you about the woman. Now you can tell me about these pentominos. And don't say they're just for making rectangles. They help me figure things out, Calder began Calder. He looked sideways at Petra. Promise you won't laugh? Why should I? What could be weirder than my dream? Well, it seems like pentominos kind of talk to me. I'll get the feeling that they want to tell me something, so I'll grab one, and a word will just pop into my head. Petra was looking at Calder with interest. I know, it sounds like a superstitious game, and it probably is. But you're right about Charles Fort. He makes you look carefully at stuff you might have ignored before. I think it's cool. Calder smiled gratefully at Petra. He should have known she'd understand. Okay, so another illustration. They're just coming quick now, aren't they? All right, so I know I need to look back at page 78, and this is page 83, so I need to look at that one. But my guess is that there's nothing here, because I think it's every other time. So in theory, there has to be a frog or something in here, right? And some pentominos. I see a pentomino. Do you see it? Look in the window. I think it's the letter F. I think it's, yeah, I think it's this right here. Just turn sideways. There's got to be more though. So I'm going to put F for now. And then I need to go back and look for frogs and stuff. But I don't want to make you wait for me. Okay. So Calder smiled gratefully at Petra. He should have known she'd understand. At 3:30 that afternoon, they're sitting behind a stack of books in the library. Let's begin with dates, okay? Petra, writing in neat purple ink, started a new page with the heading, Facts About Vermeer. Calder looked at the book in front of him. Whoa, Petra, get this. Vermeer was baptized on Halloween in 1632. That's the first fact about his life. Kind of spooky, don't you think? We started writing about him on the same day that his name was first recorded. There are more than 3.5 centuries between, here it is, Calder went on, Johannes, son of Rainier Dans, and Digna Baltons. Wait, spellings. Calder paused a moment while Petra copied the names. He went on. His father was an innkeeper in Delft, but also a weaver who manufactured a fine satin cloth called kaffa. Vermeer was an innkeeper too, and then an art dealer. Let's see. When he was 21, he married Katharina Bolms. Later that year, he was registered as a master painter in the Guild of St. Luke, became a director of the same guild several times, and had 11 children. He died in 1665, age 43. Petra was writing madly. Calder turned the page. It looks like he died owing money, and that he wasn't really famous until about 100 years ago. Huh? He's mysterious. I mean, everything about his life is. There aren't any records of how he got started or of what money his family lived on. Historians don't know where he worked or who the women and men in the paintings were, whether they were friends or family or what. I read that before. Almost nothing at all is known about him as a person. Calder looked up.
That's so strange, don't you think? I wonder if someone destroyed his notebooks or letters. Petra glanced at Calder. It does seem suspicious and sad, don't you think? These magical scenes that no one will ever know more about. Calder was reading again. You know what else? He only signed some of his paintings. I wonder why. Calder turned the page. I'd never have done that, he muttered under his breath. Let's find out more about the painting in your dream, he went on. Here it is, a lady writing. And it's in the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. The thing she's wearing is a morning jacket and has white fur around the collar and sleeves. Those big earrings are either some kind of fancy glass or pearls. Can you believe it?
Ooh, those would be very big pearls.
The oyster that made those would have been the size of a football. That's a quill pen, of course. The same chair with the lion's head nub turns up in other images. The same jewelry, furniture, even maps and paintings on the wall.
I wonder if this is Vermeer's home.
Must have been hard to work with so many kids. Petra was thinking about how noisy just 5 could be. Is anything making sense here? Calder asked. Well, there's the Halloween thing. That's a pretty weird coincidence. But is there anything else we're missing? A pattern? Numbers? It seems like there's too much connection here, Petra said slowly. Like Mrs. Sharp knowing about both Vermeer and Charles Fort. You know, Mrs. Sharp, me reading Mrs. Sharp's book and having that dream right when you were reading about Vermeer, and then the costumes we both made. Do you suppose that ideas overlap this all the time and people just don't realize it? Maybe. Outside the library, they walked several yards in silence. Calder pulled 2 packages of peanut M&Ms out of his coat and passed one to Petra. Thanks, she said, surprised. What's your favorite? He asked. The blue ones. Hey, how about the blue M&Ms symbolize secrecy? We can start a collection and eat one at special times as a sign of our determination to figure this out. It'll be kind of our own private thing. Hearing himself, Calder stopped. Petra added quickly, it'll represent us, Charles Fort and Vermeer. Perfect. They decided to save the blue M&Ms in Calder's box and keep it under his bed. Petra would hold on to the notebook. At the end of Harper Avenue, they stopped and both ate an M&M, agreeing that the color blue had a rare and mysterious taste.
And that is the end of chapter 9. All right, awesome. I look forward to reading your guys' written work this week and checking out all of your ideas and thoughts. Let me know if you find anything else. There's a glare, you can't see it. Anything else from the illustrations. So I'm going to go back to page 78 and 83. Hope to see everyone on Friday. Bye.